Hello, my name is Aretha Olivarez. I am the president of Multiplying Talents, certified nonprofit consultant, and this presentation is grant tips and more. First, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I conduct nationwide workshops, how to start a nonprofit corporation, and grant workshops, which I love doing. I love sharing with people how to set up their nonprofit and how to find grants. I have a 100% success rate of 501c3 approvals. I've been doing 501c3s for about 13 years, and that's one thing I also love to do. That's why my business is called Multiplying Talents, because there are a lot of things that I don't have time to do, but I do it through other people when they set up their nonprofit corporations. I am a decorated Navy war veteran. I spent 10 years active in the United States Navy and 14 years in the Reserve. I'm the author of 4 books: The Best Guide for Nonprofit Corporations, The Power of the 501c3, Deadly Force Recall, and The Best Guide for Nonprofit Consultants. I was a grant writer, but now I'm a grant reviewer for the City of Orlando Mayor's Matching Grant, United Way, and on occasion I review government grants. Some of my clients include Bishop T.D. Jakes. There's an organization, the abbreviation is called Query, but it's a colon and rectal education institute. SCORE, which if you've never used SCORE, I encourage you to Google them and use their free services. It's wonderful business advice for anybody who wants to start a business. They'll review your business plan for free, and it's fantastic. Also, one of my clients is Life Christian University, which I'm very, very proud to say I'm a graduate of that school, and they are using the Best Guide for Nonprofit Corporations as a book in their church administration's master's degree program. The one thing that I want to get across is the types of tax exempt organizations. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, "Can you help me get a grant to start my small business?" Well, grants are usually given to 501c3 charitable organization, and those are anybody that's doing something charitable, education, and or religious. Now, it is difficult for churches to get 501c3s. That's why I highly recommend they set up a separate 501c3 that's community based. But there are other types of 501c's like 501c4, your Rotary Club. It could be 501c6, your Chamber of Commerce. And again, there's 501c1 all the way to 27. And the only one that can get a grant is the 501c3 organization. Now, again, like I said, you cannot get a grant without a 501c3. So if you're listening to this presentation and you don't have a 501c3, there are several steps to take in order to get your 501c3. Of course, incorporating on your state level. And then the next step would be applying for the 501c3 status on the federal level. Once again, the funders, which mean the people who are giving the money, the donors, they require that you have the 501c3 because it's the only way they can write it off on their taxes. Again, I can't stress enough that churches should have a separate 501c3 from their church 501c3. Now let's get into the common word that you'll hear over and over when you're looking for a grant or when you're asking for funding. It's called RFP. It means requests for proposals. Requests for proposals. You'll see this over and over again. And what it basically means, it means that the funders are requesting you to send them a proposal. Oftentimes, if you Google the word request for proposal, all different types of words will come up. But I'm going to show you a couple of websites to go to when you're looking for proposals later on in the presentation. And what a request for proposal is basically an application notice, a grant application notice. Most of the time, since we're a technology savvy world now, the grants are accessible via the web. and you need to understand what a keyword is. Basically, a keyword is one or two words that link with what you do or what you plan to do or what you desire to do in your organization. For example, a keyword may be literacy or women or children or healthcare or firefighting. It could be any keyword that describes who you are, what you do, or what you plan to do. And usually, when you use the keyword, you'll find a link to the application from the foundation or the organization that is providing the grant information. Now, I'm going to go over some key questions that you need to know when you're looking for grants in the next slide. Now, some of the key questions when you are looking at an RFP, it will ask you or tell you who is eligible. So when you're looking at the proposal, the RFP, you need to be asking yourself, who's eligible for this grant? Am I eligible? Because if your keyword is healthcare and the grant says it's for youth or children between the ages of 9 and 15 and it's a literacy grant, obviously you know that is not one you qualify for. Another thing you need to be looking for is, when is the deadline? That's very key, because a lot of times you'll find a grant today and the deadline may be 4 weeks from now. And if you're not prepared, then obviously you're going to miss the deadline. So it's always good to be prepared for any of the deadlines by having some key information already available on your computer at your fingertips where you can copy and paste. And we'll get more into that when we talk about the session on the summary pages. Also, another key question is, what is the award amount for this grant? How much are they offering? Is it for $150,000 or is it for $4,000? Because if the grant is for $4,000 and your budget is $150,000, of course you're not going to ask them for the full amount. You will then reduce your budget to fit within the $4,000 for this particular grant. Also, a lot of times the grant will tell you this grant will only be for 4 projects. And if you are not selected, I would ask, what could you do to make sure that you're selected for the next time? Always look for the program contact on the RFP, because this is a person where you can call and ask any questions that you have that may not be listed on the grant. A lot of times the funder has thought to themselves, they've given you all the information that they want, but there may be some questions that you may have for them to make sure that you are in a key position to get this grant award. Also, another thing you need to be looking for is there matching requirements on this grant. Some grants will have where the grant is for $10,000, but you must get matching funding or donations in the amount of $10,000 for this grant. So that's very key. For example, the mayor's matching grant that I review is a $10,000 matching grant. That means that you have to get $10,000 either in volunteer hours or in dollar amount to match that $10,000. And here in Florida, 1 hour is equivalent to $19 per hour per volunteer. So I'm not good at math, so I'm just going to throw some numbers out here. They may not make any sense, but if I have 5 volunteers and they each volunteer for 20 hours, then that's a total of, say it's $5,000. You've already matched half of your $10,000 grant amount. So that's one key thing to look out for. And always check to see how much is a volunteer hour worth in your state or in your city, because it varies from state to state. Another thing that you want to ask, is there a page limit for this grant? There's no need to give a funder a full 25-page business plan when they only want 3 pages. And in your heart you may be saying, well, I need to show them everything. I need to show them the big picture. But maybe they don't want to see the big picture. They want you to stick to the point. So make sure you follow the guidelines with the page limit. Where can I get an application? Okay, again, The Foundation Center is a wonderful place to get an application. You can Google, you can spend hours online finding grant information or where to find grants. If it's a place where you have to pay, then I would definitely make sure that you have done some research, because there are websites where you do have to pay to find funders. That is, just name a couple of them. Foundation Center, it's free, but if you want to narrow it down to every single funder in your state, then you have to pay a subscription fee. There's another one called ecivis.com. That's spelled ECIV, V as in Victor, IS.com, ecivis.com. Again, another key question or that you'll see on the application is where you should submit the application if you have to mail it, because a lot of times it's different from the headquarters of the corporation. The next thing I want to discuss is something that you should always have. Everyone should always have this, whether you are a for-profit or a nonprofit, a church or any type of organization. You should always have a one-page summary about your organization. And on the next slide, I'll talk about some of the things that would be on a one-page summary. Have a one-page summary at your fingertips. You should also have a full proposal. In your package that comes with this DVD will be an example of a full proposal. Basically, it could be 3 to 5 pages, or it could be more, but it's basically an expansion of some of the things that's on your summary page. You should have your 501c3 approval letter, and I highly recommend that you have multiple copies, because it's so hard to get another one from the IRS if you lose it. In fact, if you do lose it and you request approval letter, it's not the same. It's not the same style as the original one. It's just a letter saying, yeah, they got their 501c3, and who wants that? You want to see the real deal, and the funders like to see that too. Also, you should always have your Form 990. A Form 990 is an information form. Nonprofit tax-exempt organizations do not pay taxes, but what they do is they report all the information about the funding that came in and what they did with it on a Form 990. The only ones that are exempt from filing Form 990 are churches. Another thing you should have with you is a budget. A lot of people have a hard time doing budgets, but I say think about your home budget. Write down all of your expenses. If you're brand new and you don't know what expenses you have, so you have to sit down and think about what kind of expenses will you have to run your organization, whether it's office supplies, whether it's rent, whether it's salaries, or whatever your expenses you will have, and that will help you determine what should be coming in. So that's a simple way to do your budget. And you may have different projects. You may have a project just for a summer project for a few months, so you may have a separate budget just for that summer project. You should also have your short and long-term goals. A lot of funders want to know, what's your long-term goal? And they're thinking about developing a relationship with you. Oftentimes you can go back to the funder and get additional funding the second year and the third year. So be thinking about your long-term goals as well as your short-term goals. You should list businesses or donors who may be willing to match dollar amounts that you receive from grant funding. I cannot stress this very last one. Have an up-to-date list of your board of directors and or advisors. A lot of people have listed their board of directors, and some of the people have moved away, or they're deceased, or they're just, the board list is not current. So that's one thing you should definitely have. Now we're going to talk about what's on the summary page. So this is a one-page condensed version of your full proposal. You would have your mission and your vision statement, and that could be in one paragraph, or if you want to make it 1 or 2 sentences. The rule of thumb is your mission statement should be 25 words or less. Now I've also heard it should be 40 words or less. So as long as it makes sense, but keep it short and keep it to the point. Then you want to have your project description. Now, what do I mean by project description? Every grant that you apply for is going to ask you to name your project or your program. So if you're doing a youth literacy program for the summer, your project may be called Youth Literacy Summer Program. So that would be your project, Youth Literacy Summer Program project. Or excuse me, not have the word program, Youth Literacy Summer Project. That would be your project description and the name of your project. You should always have your target market and the geographic area that you are serving. The Census Bureau is updated now. It was last done in 2010, but you have access to all of the information that the city has. If you're working with a school, you can look up your county school board website and find out how many schools that you have. But target areas and geographic information is readily accessible now on the internet using all kinds of search engine tools. You should also have your organizational description. Now, what do I mean by that? That's different from what you plan to do. This is about your organization. For example, you would say, I'm going to use my name, for example, Aretha Olivarez Youth Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 that was established in 1999 to serve the youth by providing after school mentoring. So that describes my organization. And then you want to have your primary contact information, the name, the address, the email, the phone number, something where they can reach you, your financial request, and the purpose that you're asking for funding for. For example, you would say that we are requesting a $25,000 grant to buy new computers for our summer program. So that would be the amount and the purpose that we're going to use the money for. And you always want to have the total amount requested on a separate line. Again, you'll see an example of a summary page in one of the handouts that we'll have along with this CD. The evaluation and accountability. A lot of funders want to know who will evaluate you. Will you have a CPA, or is the accountability vested in your board of directors? And if it is, that's okay. But that's one thing you want to mention, that the board of directors will be accountable for the oversight of the funding or CPA. Now, I talked a little about a budget earlier, how to figure out your budget, but there's a difference between the program budget and the administrative budget. A lot of times the funder will say you can only use this grant for administrative process, or you can only use it for a program. So if they say you can only use it for your program, that means materials for your programs or office supplies. You can use it to pay the rent, but you can't use it to pay the salaries, and vice versa. If they say on the grant proposal that it could be used for administrative or programming, then you know that you can add your staff salaries or stipends that you pay any independent contractors, etc. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, grant writing is such a difficult task and it's so daunting. And it is. I got to be honest with you, but it can be very rewarding. But I also want you to think about the connections that you have and the relationships that you may already have with potential funders, businesses, or people that you use every day, your doctors, or you shop at Walmart and Target and those places. So think about any connections or relationships that you have within the 50-mile radius of your organization. This could even be places that your friends and family work, or that your neighbors work. My next door neighbor works for Disney. She's been with Disney, for 20 something years. So of course she gets a lot of perks, and she may have a relationship with somebody higher in the food chain, which can, give us some donations that we need to use at our silent auction, or the ideas of what you can use besides getting a grant is limitless. Also think about your local, state, and federal officials. And what I mean by that is your mayors, your senators, your congressmen. They came to you for you to vote them in office. So now is a good time to use them while they're in office. And how you can get things from them is by asking for letters of support or letters of endorsements. Now, what you would do, you would write them a letter describing your organization, saying that you're a nonprofit 501c3 and what you do, and they will in turn respond to that letter stating that this organization is a nonprofit 501c3, and then they will repeat what you said. But having their seal or on their letterhead, it sometimes weighs very heavily when you're looking for funding. So it's good to have those and make sure that they are up to date. You get one once a year. It's also a good time to just get to know them and let them know what you're doing in their office or in their community. Now, I want to talk about a couple of websites that you can use to find grants. There, of course, there is the whitehouse.gov that has faith-based grants and neighborhood partnership grants for faith-based organization. Some of them, the categories that are really, really hot topic right now are fatherhood initiatives, marriage counseling, positive reentry for people who are coming out of prisons, children and healthy families is another big one, job training that will never, never go away, and of course the veterans. But besides going through the White House website, the easiest way to find these grants is go to grants.gov. That's really the easiest way. And then again, you would put one of these words in as your keyword. So job training would be your keyword, and believe me, hundreds and hundreds of grants will come up for either one of these keywords. So I'm going to go to a couple of other websites, and you can see, just put in one of those keywords and see where you can find grants. Some other grant websites is the Foundation Center, as I mentioned. That's a very, very popular website. They have a free subscription whereby you can just type in a keyword. What you would do is go to the top of the page, and where the link says Find Funders, then you would go down the bar where it says Request for Proposal. There you would click on that link and then put in your keyword. So if your keyword was job training, every grant that has the word job training will come up. Also, there is usaspending.gov. If you are interested, say you want to get a grant for your community, you would go to that site and find out other organizations that are in your community that may have received a grant. Say if I was doing a grant for fatherhood initiatives, if I went to USA Spending, I would put in that keyword and narrow it down to my city, and then it may pull up another organization. Well, if they're doing the same thing we're doing, we may not qualify for that grant, so you may want to partner with them. Again, some other resources are your local and federal government. All of your mayors and your congressmen, your senators, they have grant writers in their office. They probably will not write the grant for you, but they may be able to tell you about resources that are available to you for your particular venture. Again, think about organizations, companies, corporations that are in a 50-mile radius. Some other resources besides getting grant funding are in-kind services. A lot of people don't know that's a keyword that's used in the grant community, in-kind services or gifts in kind. When you are, say you need an office space to rent, and instead of asking for a grant, you want to ask for in-kind services. Or if you need office supplies, if you need office furniture, or you need a brand new vehicle, then you would go to a car dealer and ask if they would donate in kind, if they would donate a vehicle, and they can write that off on their taxes. There's one organization that used to be called Gifts in Kind International. Now they're called Good 360, and their website is good360.org. You may also find in-kind donation from your local United Way. In Orlando, Florida, we have a warehouse full of things from local organization like Office Depot and Bed Bath and Beyond, because what happens is the large corporations, they need to move stuff off their shelves and they don't have time to find the nonprofits. So what they'll do is they'll give it to one large organization like United Way that can distribute it inside the community. So we've gone through what to do as far as writing a summary page and some of the things that need to be in your grant and where to find grants. So what happens when you get the grant? There are a lot of other steps. I mean, getting the grant is just the beginning. You've done the hard part, but now the hardest part comes. And one of that things that you need to pay attention to is administering the grant, especially any government grant. So you may get grants from 3 different organizations. You definitely need to set aside an accounting system for each grant, because a lot of times you have to account for every penny for that particular grant. So you definitely want to read over and over the regulations for this grant and make sure that you are complying with what they are asking you to do. Another thing you definitely want to pay attention to, if they're asking for quarterly reports on the dollar amount that you spent, make sure you are meeting the deadline, because that's one way to set yourself up to receive the grant the next time the funding is coming around. What I always recommend people do is have a folder or a file and divide your records so that you stay organized. For example, one file may say deadline for March, and the next file will say deadline for November. You have different, everybody will have their own system, but make sure that you do stay organized so that you can capture all the information you need, put it in the file folder, then be able to report accurately what you need to report to the funders. One thing that you definitely want to do is to maintain your relationship with the funders. Write thank you letters, thank you notes, send them, don't send them flowers, don't spend a lot of money, because they don't want you to spend their money on buying them gifts, but they love your thank you letters. They love that you've kept up your website and that you've had maybe their banner on their website. Find different ways to say thank you. And you definitely want to keep your website updated. It's nothing worse than someone who's interested in supporting you and they go to your website and you have dates from 1999 on there. That does not look good. Also, you want to make sure that you have pictures on there. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, as they say, and it definitely is. You want to definitely list your supporters. That's definitely important for your 990 as well, making sure that you keep track of all your supporters, because they're going to report it to the IRS and you want to make sure their report matches with your report. One thing I always require, or not require, I request my clients to do is to go to the IRS website, irs.gov, and make sure you stay abreast to the changes that are happening in the nonprofit world. It's very, very important. There are always changes. I get emails twice a month on, different things. I just got an email on something that Congress amended for, the nonprofits. So it's definitely key to stay abreast to what's going on in the nonprofit world. Now I want to ask you a question. Are grants really gifts? I mean, we always say, a grant is a gift, and it really is, but if it's a government grant and you mess up that money, it's not a gift, it becomes a loan. So you want to make sure you keep track of every dime that you spend and everything that you use it for what you say you were going to use it for. If I highly suggest that you have someone come to do an audit. It could be a CPA, or it could be a friend who has a bookkeeping background, so that they can make sure they match your dollars with your cents. That's the only way to do it. Again, I can't stress enough to study your grant agreement. A lot of times now I'm talking mainly about government grants, because a lot of times you get checks from corporations that say, look, we got to give the money away, don't worry about it, have fun, spend it, and they don't care. But there are some grants, when you write the grant and you tell them you're going to use it for X, Y, and Z, they expect you to use it for X, Y, and Z, and they expect you to use it the way you said you were going to use it for. So what I definitely suggest when you get your grant agreement is to write a checklist of what is expected of you. Keep it on your wall and make sure that you stay compliant. Make sure that you are paying attention to how the money is being spent. Now, if you get large grants, I definitely want to ask you to make sure that you get insurance, because embezzlement of grants is not unheard of. So if you get a grant and you have to buy equipment or things with this grant money, make sure you get insurance on it, because if it's stolen, somebody could just break in your building randomly. Make sure you have insurance and you get bonded, and make sure your board, your staff follow sound ethical procedures. I can't say enough about that. And with that being said, you want to make sure that if you run into a conflict of interest, that you update your bylaws and you have a statement in there about, ethical procedures and conflict of interest. Well, I hope you enjoyed the workshop. If you are interested in learning more, my contact information is multiplyingtalents@gmail. You can also call me at 407-575-0685. I'd love to come to share with your organization or come and speak for your organization.